Hi. Today we are meeting Abby. She's a foster care worker, works in the US. She'll tell us more about where. I'm going to hand it over to Abby to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Abby. I am currently a foster care worker in Michigan. I'm in the Metro Detroit area, so it's a very populated, diverse community. And I've been in this current role for a little over a year now.
Wonderful. And so, Abby, can you tell us about some other roles you've had, maybe also how long you've worked in the organization? Um, and then maybe a little bit about what you do in your current role.
Yeah. So I did my bachelor's and master's degrees right at the same time. So I finished my master's degree in criminal justice in 2021. And then straight from that job, I started working with Child Protective Services. I was an investigator. I did that for about almost a year. And then I moved to Boston, which is in Massachusetts in the United States as well. And I worked in community mental health for about 6 months. Then I came back to the Metro Detroit area, worked with homeless youth for about a year. And then I realized I want to go back to child welfare and wanted to give foster care a try. So now I'm here and I think I'll be here for a while. I'm super passionate about it. And my role currently is we get families that come from Child Protective Services. We either get children that are temporary court wards, meaning the parents are working towards the goal of reunification, or permanent court wards when parents' rights have been terminated or are about to be terminated. And then those are adoption cases. So I work with the children and families directly, a lot of different stakeholders, law enforcement, the courts, doctors, parents, all that.
Okay. What um if we can start with, what would you say to those who are watching, if you could talk about what are the differences that you've found between being, because you've done child protection frontline
Mhm.
and now you're in the other role. And so can you explain to those who might not understand what is the difference between the two roles? What do you do primarily day in and day out in the investigator um role versus what you do now?
Yeah, so in Child Protective Services, as an investigator, I would get all the cases as soon as they would come in. So they would go through intake and then immediately come to me, and then I was the one to investigate whether there was a preponderance of evidence of abuse or neglect. So I would only have a case for about 30 days, and then I never got to see it again. And then in foster care, I'm the after part of that. So once kids are either removed or rights are terminated, I get the case, and then I get to see it throughout. So I either get to see kids be reunified with their parents, kids be adopted, guardianship sometimes. So the main difference for me, which I wanted to be in foster care and realize this is more up my alley, is being able to see things through. If you're like quick and just like to, run through a caseload, CPS is definitely for you, but I like to see, the success of it and where it goes. And more of, I like to say, like the happy side of things. That's more my vibe.
So what might be some of your responsibilities as a foster care worker?
So we have to do monthly home visits in the home with the children. Um, I go to court quarterly for all my cases. If the case is a reunification case, I have to give updates on all the services that the parents are doing. If it's an adoption case, I just give a quick update on how the kids are doing and if there's any issues in placement. We have quarterly reports that are due that, again, same thing goes over everything that's been going on. It does come up when kids have to be removed, either in an emergency placement or something you know is coming. So I will help move kids around. Um, and honestly, like I always say that I am the kids' caseworker, and the parents' caseworker, but it's honestly just becomes like a whole family thing. I mean, I'll help with really anything. I'm so passionate that I tend to go above and beyond, just because I love it so much.
So how many you said the child's caseworker, I'm the parent's caseworker, I'm the family caseworker. Uh, so as I understand, there would be a caseworker for the child and there's a caseworker for the family. What specifically do you take on in that group of professionals working with the family and children?
So for the kids, like I said, I have to see them monthly. So that is more for like the foster parents or relative caregivers and the kid. I'll just make sure that they have like any services in place that the kids need. That's they're enrolled in school, school's going good. I'm just like the mediator between the foster parents and schools sometimes for like IEPs. And then also for the parent side, the birth parent side, I have to do quarterly visits with them if they are still acting towards the goal of reunification. So do a home assessment, provide them with any services, supervise their parenting time, help them get jobs and housing, and just kind of work together to get to that goal.
Got it. Okay. And uh, on average, how many cases do you manage
The R max is 13, and I'm at 13 right now.
at 13? And
Mhm.
that is 13 cases, but each case would have multiple children.
It's 13 children. We count cases
Got it.
as children. Yeah. So I
Okay.
have 13 kids. Yeah.
13 kids. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, because it's different in different jurisdictions where it's counted as a case and you can have five kids.
Yeah.
Okay, but for you as children.
Yeah.
Got it.
CPS is different. CPS is counted by the case, not the child. So
I see.
yeah.
And give us a sense of the types of cases that come across for you where you're working with those kids who have been in care. So to give the audience an understanding of when kids end up in care, what are the types of cases that um, led them to being in care?
Yeah, so it has to be either some type of abuse or neglect. So like physical abuse, sexual abuse. It could be improper supervision, which is very, very broad. Um, and the one that I see the most is probably drug use. So either the babies are born tested positive to substances or the parents are abusing substances, which then leads to lack of housing or lack of supervision, which brings the kids into care. Um, I will say my caseload now is a pretty different variety of what brought the kids in. I have probably split with physical abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect, any type of neglect like substance abuse or improper supervision.
Okay, so fascinating. I recall about a decade ago when I was still working frontline that fentanyl was a huge issue.
Hmm.
Is that still an issue in your jurisdiction? When you say substance use, you're talking about fentanyl or another type of drug?
Fentanyl is definitely one that we are seeing increasing. Every time a case comes in, I would say we're seeing an increased rate at that. But it's also other substances. I mean, heroin, methamphetamines, marijuana, which can be tricky because it is a legal substance in Michigan. At least it's legal, so that one gets a little bit touchy. But fentanyl is definitely something that we're seeing quite often.
Okay, so still an issue. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and might be a hard question to answer. I'm sure some would be curious to ask about the length of time that kids typically stay in care. And you said you get to see the happy ending. So is that when they go back home or they get adopted? And how often do kids go back home with moms and dads?
Yeah, so I have such a different caseload right now. I have one case that's been the kids have been in care for 4 years. And then I had one earlier this year that the kids were in care for about 9 months and got returned home. So there is unfortunately no timeline. It really is how quick the parents work their treatment plan to get the kids back, how fast we see progress. Um, it I wish I could give more of like a straightforward answer, but it is, and it's frustrating as a worker there really is no timeline. And it's frustrating for the parents too, because they look and say, oh, if I make it a year, then I can get my kid back. But there's so many variables that go into it. So It just really depends on the case. And then reunification versus adoption. I currently have more cases that the kids are permanent court wards, so the adoption is the goal is adoption, which for a lot of kids ends up. I mean, I can understand why people think it would seem sad. They're getting removed from their parents, which is obviously a very traumatic event. But some of these kids go straight into the system from birth. So all they know is, being with either a relative or a foster parent, and they're going to be adopted. And I look at that as, such a happy ending because that kid didn't have to go through those things when they are, going to remember it. And that's just like home to them. So that makes it a little bit easier.
And um, can you describe for viewers what um, because it might be look different in different jurisdictions. What is a foster home versus because some have seen in movies or shows concepts of group homes and foster. What is the difference?
Yeah, so a what we call a foster home typically is a licensed foster care provider. So someone who has to go through an entire licensing process to be licensed with the state to be able to foster children. And then we have relative providers who aren't typically, some of them will end up getting licensed, but typically aren't licensed. So like an aunt, grandma, cousin. And they're just able to, as soon as they pass an assessment, and background checks and everything, they're able to take the child.
And do you have group homes? Is that
I like typically have a younger caseload. So all my kids are either in relative placements or with a licensed foster care provider. So I can't speak to the group home, but I know that there are kids in the system
in
that
Michigan there are group homes? Got
yeah.
it. And the you call them relative care that
Hmm.
versus licensed foster or
Yeah.
licensed relative.
Hmm.
Um, so the relative care is that how often do once again might be a hard question. How often do children who come into care end up in relative versus licensed foster care?
I would say from what I've seen, it's more common that kids come into care like into a relative placement.
Okay,
Unfortunately, there are times when the relative placement just doesn't work out, and then if there's no other relatives, then they'll go into a licensed foster home. And I also, from what I've seen, the bigger the group of kids, the harder it is to keep them with relatives.
okay,
So my bigger cases are kind of some are with a relative and some are with the licensed foster care provider. Just because I mean the bigger the sibling group, the more work.
for sure. And so when you talked earlier about length of cases that are open, you said 9 months or 4 years. Um, could be with kinship, meaning an aunt or a grandma,
Hmm.
correct? So they're not
Hmm.
with strangers.
Correct. Yeah, some kids are with I mean quote unquote strangers with the licensed foster care provider, but some are also with, aunt, grandma, cousin.
And during those, you talked about access. So can you give us a sense of coming into care? It doesn't suggest that caregivers are not having access or seeing their kids. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, like the birth parents.
Birth parents, correct? Yeah.
Yeah. So if the goal is reunification, then parenting time is offered. And even in some situations, if the goal is termination, parenting time is still offered. It's just dependent on how severe the reasoning is. But once they come in, they're offered parenting time based on the kid's age is how often they come. So for like the younger kids, they get 2 days a week for 2 hours. So it starts off supervised by the agency typically. So they'll come in and then I would sit down and watch their parenting time, jump in when necessary, redirect when necessary. And then as they progress, if they're doing better, then they can switch to a visit outside the agency when they have like a family member or a friend watch. And then the next step is unsupervised. And then the next step is reunification at home.
Understood.
Hmm.
And out of curiosity, what are and this is a question that might also you might also touch on it if when I ask you about some misconceptions and maybe that you want to clarify. But what would be a situation where reunification is impossible and you're moving more so towards permanency? So what's the threshold?
Yeah, so sexual abuse cases are typically an automatic termination. Once they come into CPS, the CPS worker will typically just complete a termination of parental rights petition. A lot of times, babies that are born addicted to substances are also an automatic petition. And then another time we see it go towards the goal of termination is when the parents just don't participate. Either they are completely absent and don't even answer the phone, or they're spotty with services, or I mean, I've seen some that are compliant in all services but just keep getting positive drug screens. So that is typically what would start the conversation for changing the goal.
Understood. Okay. Um, and I start these videos and it takes about 20 minutes to half an hour to get a sense, ask lots of questions about the role itself to give the audience an understanding of what you do. Is there anything else about what you do that you think others would be curious about that maybe I forgot or did not ask you?
Um, no, I guess kind of I was just going to like more of the misconception thing.
We'll
That's
get
kind
there.
of yeah,
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 we'll get
that's kind of yeah, the
it,
more yeah.
but in terms of what you do day in and day out, how it might differ between states or countries, anything that I didn't ask?
I mean, I don't know too much about other states. I do have a family friend that works in another state in a similar field, and there are some differences, but when it comes to the courts, it seems like it's more unified, I guess. But I will say, I mean, even in my county, it kind of depends on the judge how they go about things sometimes. So,
Okay.
yeah, I know, I mean, there's policy and there's laws that have to be followed, but there's also like wiggle room and a little, thinking outside the box, you can change something a little bit, which I definitely see and has its pros and cons for sure. But
Okay. I asked because when I heard you talk about certain cases that in near jurisdictions are automatic um, termination and move
Mhm.
towards adoption, in in other countries or jurisdictions, it's not the case.
Okay.
And so that's what I was curious about.
Mhm.
Um, it sounds like um, there's certain established understandings or kind of paradigms or mindsets about we're okay, this we can work with, but this type of abuse, I'm sorry, it can't be.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. um so let's shift a little bit and ask about you've talked about your before you joined child protection, and you've worked in uh, your field of choice sounds to be social services related.
Mhm.
What drew you to child protection?
So I went to school for criminal justice. I didn't go the social work route. I was just kind of unsure of exactly where I wanted to go. And I was always interested in investigating, like being a detective, that type of job. But I never had any desire to be a cop. So you have to be a cop to be a detective. So I was like, you know what? I love kids. I've worked with kids since I was, 12 babysitting. And I know to be a CPS worker, you don't have to be a cop. So I thought that would be fun to see the investigation side of things. So that's what drew me in. And then I quickly realized that was not for me, which is
Okay.
why I wasn't there very long. But I knew that I eventually wanted to be back in child welfare. I just needed a break. And then decided to try the other side, the foster care side of things.
Okay. And again, I'm mindful of countries, jurisdictions, states. You're still within child welfare when you say the other
Mhm.
side. So you're
Yes.
still working for child welfare on
Yes.
foster care. And that's the same in other jurisdictions. I just want for those who don't understand or might not
Mhm.
understand.
Yes.
Um, and okay, so Um, interesting that you talk about you wanted to do the investigate the you're drawn to the investigation aspect of the job, didn't want to be a cop. You did it, didn't last too long because you said you didn't like some of it. What didn't you like, or what was I'm not going to suggest any words here, but what was it about the job that you had to step away from it?
Um, it was just very high stress. It to me just seemed like so impersonal. Um, I wasn't able to, really get to know the families. Um, it just seemed like almost a burden to some of these people. Because I mean, if a call comes in and it seems even a little bit serious, it has to be investigated. And I mean, sometimes right off the bat, I would know that there wasn't much to go off of, but I'm still inserting myself into someone's life and disrupting their home, and the kids get confused, and it just seemed very like impersonable to me, which was really tough. And then just the high level of stress and the caseload. And I mean, some of the things I saw were just horrific. I mean, being the first one who has to respond, um, and not really have a chance to, know a lot of information beforehand and just go in kind of blind. It was super tough.
Okay. Okay. And now, okay, so you went away, came back, and you are sounds like you're loving the foster care side of things.
Hmm.
What um would you say maybe are some of the misunderstandings about what you do?
I think that people just think of the foster care system as just like very sterile and cold and removing kids and putting them in foster homes with 15 other kids like you see on the movies and the kids aren't being checked up on and they things fall like slip under the cracks. I think are all some of the major ones. Which I mean, there are rules and regulations about how many kids can be in a home. I see my kids at least once a month. There's plenty of kids I see 2 or 3 times. If I think something's like a little bit sketchy or the kids need a little bit more help, I go over there. I mean, I treat these kids like they're my own. Which I know that there's definitely bad apples out there, so I can't speak to everybody, but I know the people I work with, I mean, we're all just so passionate and we can really take our time and see things through. Um, and it's a much better place.
Are there other misconceptions that you hear um, more about that are completely untrue?
Um, I would say, I mean, this kind of falls for the CPS side of things too, but like that the kids are just like ripped out of the home. It is a whole process. You have meetings beforehand. I mean, obviously, if it's a very severe situation when the kid needs to be removed, like in that exact moment, yes, but from what I've seen, it's very gentle and it's a traumatic event no matter what. So people try their best to, make sure if it's a little baby that they're, comfortable and have all their blankets and stuff, or they, you give them a snack or a toy, or a teenager, try to relate to them on like a personal level. And it's just not as like cold and aggressive as people think.
Okay. Okay. And in your role now in foster care, what might be hardest challenges of that role?
I mean, it can definitely be hard. I think I see so much potential in people, sometimes to a fault a little bit. So I can take it kind of hard when parents don't do what they're, quote unquote supposed to do. And I mean, I'm just like such a firm believer in second chances, and I don't like to think that, if you do something bad one time that it should affect you for the rest of your life. Obviously, there's those severe circumstances, but just, removing myself sometimes from, I'm not the parent, I can't make that decision. And, just thinking that obviously the kid will be better off if the parent doesn't want to be involved and strung along. But that's definitely a difficult part is parents who just don't want to try anymore.
Okay. And so what's the hardest part of that for you?
Um, just like on a personal level, just, thinking like, don't you want to see your kids? Don't you want to, work back towards this goal? Like we're offering all these services. And I mean, I get really involved and I'll send like extra resources if they need it. And then it's really hard when the kid is like visibly upset that they're not able to see their parents or asking, why haven't I seen mom? Why haven't I seen dad? And I don't want to tell the kid that it's, because the mom and dad don't want to see the kid. So you kind of have to beat around the bush. And the little ones, it's easy, but the older ones, I mean, they can tell. So it's hard when the kids are affected by it.
And there are lots of jobs where you take the work home with you.
Hmm.
What is unique about what you do and how it impacts um, what you bring home?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely hard to separate work from home sometimes, especially, I mean, I work remote, at least 2, 3 days a week, if I'm not out in the field. But I try my best to like log off at the end of the day if I know that everything is good. We have an on-call phone, so there's always someone available if someone needs it, which helps a lot. But it is nice to bring home in this field like success stories that I'm able to share with my family and friends, obviously, like, not giving specific details, or even just being, I have a kid that's about to be adopted this week. Like that is, put me in such a good mood and made even after work happy for me, knowing that one of my kids is, going to be in their forever home.
Are there um, um, before asking you about some of the rewarding aspects of the job, um, what are the ways that you found that are helpful for you to manage those emotional challenges when you of the job?
I have a great team, so I definitely rely on my supervisor and my coworkers just to, talk it out. Um, and that's honestly the most helpful thing for me is just to talk it out with my supervisor, get her opinion or get a coworker's opinion. And then, some days I'll work for the week and it's a Thursday afternoon and I have done everything and I'm like, I need a break, so I'll take the next day off, which helps a lot, just being able to kind of completely shut down, even if it's just like a random, half Friday or something like that.
So it, you have a solid team you lean on, solid
Hmm.
supervisor. Okay.
Definitely. Which is it's if I didn't, it would be way tougher because I mean,
Okay.
this is a job you need people in your circle constantly.
So no saying that you need people in your circle constantly without details on particular cases, what are the situations that would cause you to want to take a day off or send you running to talk to colleagues and your supervisor?
Um, Moving kids is always hard for me. If I'm moving a kid for not a good reason, it's difficult for me. Um, Also like some of the higher strung parents who sometimes can get really escalated and not in a way that I necessarily fear for my safety, but just mentally I need to check out. That's something that will come up. Tough days in court if things don't go the way that we had expected. Just those type of things typically.
Okay. What you mentioned moving kids. Can you give us um insight into what happens that kids need to be moved? Why are kids moved?
Yeah, so it can be sometimes it's at the request of the relative or the foster parent. Either, they can't do it anymore, the kid has more needs than they expected. That's a very common one. Sometimes it's issues within the home that we find that are no longer appropriate. Sometimes it's as serious as a CPS case that has been called in on the relative or the foster parent, which then requires an automatic removal. So I mean, it can definitely vary. And there are removals when it is, kind of happy. I just had one the other day that that was definitely in the best interest of the child. And it was, a fun, happy day. And we listened to Christmas music and he was laughing and smiling. And I mean, there's definitely those, but it's more times than not, it's usually a little bit sad.
And nice transition into, so what is most rewarding about being in foster care?
It's definitely just the kids getting the ending they deserve. I mean, whether it's going back home to mom and dad, getting adopted, it's just the stability for them and them being happy and, being able to no longer, I mean, a lot of the kids are little, but some of the older kids being able to know that they're no longer in the system and they have a place that they can call home forever and, they don't have to worry constantly. Some of those kids are moved 8 times. When they finally get that permanency, they know that they're home and, there's not going to be a day that they have to leave again.
Right. Um, it's yeah, you're talking about the day-to-day little things that for some take for granted. Um, so what is it? Maybe if you're able to give us an example or a story um where the ending, like the outcome was a success in the way that you would define success. Like what would
Yeah.
particular story maybe that or experience, a case that comes to mind with a child?
Yeah, I had a few months ago I had a case that was a return home case, so the kids got to be reunified with mom. It was unexpected. Were in court. We weren't expecting it to happen that day, and it did. And just seeing the parents are crying and so joyful and happy, and the kids are old enough to understand what's going on, so they thought it was like the best day ever that they get to go back home, and seeing them afterwards just to make sure that they're good and settled in, and keeping up the contact for a little bit, and just seeing a whole family unit, reunified after they had gone through so many hardships. And there were definitely times when everyone was like, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? And just seeing them able to get to that point of success is just super exciting.
And how long was that child out of parental care?
That one was the quick one. It was about 9 months.
9 months.
Yeah,
Okay. Still fairly long, but you're saying that's the quick.
that's quick. Yeah,
That's quick.
everyone
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like 9 months. That's crazy. Yeah, like I think anything under a year is always a
Okay, so
surprise.
yeah, what others might not understand is you're saying 9 months is quick.
Yeah.
What so what is it within your system that um leads to that extension of kids being in care? Like, what is it that has gotten your system to a place where 9 months is the quick versus a month or 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, it can be the parents aren't, completing their services, and the foster care workers and the judge together just give them more time and think that they're gonna be able to get it together. There's also wait lists for everything. So even just getting a referral in can take a couple months for the parents to be able to start, which is obviously no fault to the parents. Um, so it's typically one of those, and it's usually just the decision of, do we give the parents more time, or is this it?
But you've identified an element that maybe the public doesn't know or understand that is outside of your control, which is services.
Mhm.
Some services there's a wait list and it takes a long time. So it isn't that you are holding things up; they're waiting to get into a service. You're saying,
Correct.
I see.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on the worker, how quick they put the referrals into can really um, make or break that timeline.
Okay. Are there other realities, could be any ones you want to talk about that you think would be helpful for the public to understand about your work in foster care?
Um, I mean, I think people look at it as a sad job. which I mean, it has its moments, but it is so rewarding. I go home most nights with some type of smile on my face because I try to think of something good that's happened. Um, I mean, I think people also think sometimes that, workers going in and out can be really disruptive, but I build a rapport with my family so that the kids are always happy to see me, and they don't even, think of me as a negative part of their life and me coming in because they are in the system. I try to make it fun and, play games and, ask them about life outside of living in a relative home or a foster home. And it can be much more rewarding and happy than, it can look from the outside.
Okay. And how long did you say you've been in foster care?
Just over a year.
Just over. So in the
Yeah.
in the last year, um, any most memorable or craziest or funniest, not laughing at situation, not
Yeah.
kids, but funniest circumstance that you've come across? Even
Um,
weird or strange?
hmm. There's always something. The last couple weeks, that's been my saying is there's always something. Um, Trying to think if there's anything specific. I mean, it's the kids always say like the funniest things, and like I said, I have a lot of littles, so and I love that age range. I mean, I like love the teenagers too, but the little ones, I always just like have such a little special place in my heart for them. So they're always cracking me up, but. I mean, some things that the birth parents will say are always interesting, or the excuses are always my favorite to see what they come up with sometimes. And I think that
What's the best excuse?
typically it comes around the drug screen. So it'll always be something about, "Well, I didn't take that. I didn't do this." And, they don't understand that it's coming positive for a reason. And we know how long stuff stays in your system. And, those are usually the best. Or, when they have an excuse of, "Oh, I'm at work. I can't come." And then we find out that they are, vacationing in the Bahamas or something. Those are always funny to see what they think they can get away with.
What would be advice to anyone who's thinking about stepping into child welfare that any perspective, new, um, um, maybe someone who's thinking about it, what might you uh, tell them about this job?
Yeah, I would say that you have to be extremely passionate to be in this field. You have to be passionate, you have to be compassionate, empathetic. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's definitely not for people who are trying to make a ton of money. So it's one of those jobs when your heart has to be all in it. And then if it is and you love it, it can be so rewarding. I see myself in this field for the rest of my life, in the child welfare or foster care realm of things. But it's because I'm so passionate, and like I said, I treat these kids like they're my own. And I mean, it can be tough, but and know it's okay to have bad days. It's not going to be rainbows and butterflies, but just be strong and have a good support system around you inside and outside of work. And then, I mean, things like this, I think is going to help, change the idea of child welfare just in general. So I think it'll be helpful.
And is there what if you thought about the public or professionals that you work with, are there ways that if you spoke to them directly, that you could suggest the ways that they can support foster care or child welfare? What would that be? What are the best ways that they can support the work that you do?
I think, I mean, educating yourself on the child welfare system, is huge, so you understand what's going on. I know my agency and a lot of agencies that do similar work, I mean, they'll take volunteers for certain things, they'll take donations. We do like community events all the time. that, people can either stop in at or be a part of, to learn more. And I mean, some of them you even get to work directly um, with parents, kids, foster parents. Like, we have things that are very easy for people to just come and donate or participate and feel like they're really a part of something, which I think can be really good for people who are interested in learning more.
Any specific special advice to family member who is approached by someone within the family to ask them to become kinship providers?
Yeah, I think it's definitely not an easy job. I know that some people's first thought is yes without hesitation, but it's okay to hesitate and ask questions, and just really be a part of the entire process so you know what's going on, if this is a permanent situation, a temporary situation, and definitely think long term. I tell anyone who is interested in adopting the child that they have, you know you need to see this happening when this kid is 17 and, you know, still at home with you. And, just because a kid turns 18 doesn't mean that it's time for them to go. Some kids stay in the home until they're 23. And, how old will you be at this time? Is this something that's long term for you and appropriate to fit your goals? I mean, we have people who are 65 and then get a 1-year old in their home. And we have to really make sure that it's something that they want and that's appropriate for them and it's fair to them. And I say ask all the questions because that that's what we're here for.
Okay. I yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. Um given you started by saying in the moment you'll want to help, but please ask
Mhm.
all the questions because
Mhm.
you want to ensure that it sticks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I mean, there's times someone says yes, and a few months later, it's just not a good fit, which is very understandable. But then it just disrupts the child's placement again.
And you talked about why that's incredibly hard for a child.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
very dramatic. Yeah.
Questions that I didn't ask that you thought I should have asked, or anything else to add that you think would be important to say?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of good resources out there for people who are interested in becoming foster parents, or just interested in learning more. And I'm always trying to get people to become foster parents because we need them desperately. So if it's something that, anyone listening is interested in, just do a quick Google search for your area and, get some information. And it doesn't hurt to at least apply to see if you're going to be a good fit.
How long does it take? What's the process like, and how long does it take?
I don't know exactly how long it takes. I mean, we have a licensing department, but I don't do too much with them unless it's involving one of my kids directly. But it is a process. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, background checks and home visits and fingerprinting and all that. But if it's the right fit for you, it's very rewarding, and I know a lot of people love it.
Excellent. This was fantastic, Abby. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.